Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my book review of the book, Mostly Harmless, by Douglas Adams. This is the fifth and final book in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Technically, there was a sixth book released by another author years later, but this is the last one written by Douglas Adams. And so this is like the conclusion of the series, and I've had a very mixed relationship with this series because I think the series is of mixed quality. For instance, the first book, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I thought was an amazing book. I thought this was brilliant. I thought it was funny. I thought that the ideas presented were great, and it was a great start to a series. And I was so excited to read more. And then I read book 2, The Restaurant at the End of the Universe, and I thought it was just okay. It was not a good story. It was not a great story. It was not a bad story. It was competently done, but it wasn't entertaining. And it was mostly because it wasn't really following the stuff in book 1. And so it was just okay. That's what I put for book 2, okay. First one was great, second book was okay. Then I read the third book, which I think was legitimately bad because it had like no plot focus. This book was just random things happening, jokes just being thrown in all the time, and it wasn't even that funny, and it wasn't even that clever a story. And I get that this series isn't meant to be taken the most seriously, but you gotta be competent in your storytelling if you're writing a novel. Otherwise, just write a joke book. And so that was why I was so frustrated with book 3, and so I thought I did not give it a good rating. Then I read So Long and Thanks for All the Fish, and I didn't know what to expect from this one, but I loved it. I thought it was a great book. It's not quite as good as book 1, but So Long and Thanks for All the Fish is a very good book, and it has a great romance, and it really got me excited to continue on with the series. And I thought, okay, after, book 3, Douglas Adams got right back on the correct path with book 4, so maybe book 5 will tie it all together and finish it up well. Well, it doesn't. I'm going to put this book more in the okay realm. The reason I think it's better than the third book is because at least the story here is competent. At least it makes general sense. At least it flows. At least it's not just total random events happening. And there's reason for everything in this book. So it's better than the third book because of that. Oh, that's not saying that much about this book because it's so frustrating. First of all, and I have to get kind of situational spoilers for the series and for this book as well. This is not like major spoilers, but it's minor spoilers. In this book, we pick up and Arthur Dent has been thrown into this other, it's a year after So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. He's been thrown into this alternate universe, basically, and Fenchurch is just gone. He just doesn't know where she is. And Douglas Adams could have made the whole book about him going to search for Fenchurch, and I would have loved that plot, and that would have been a good plot. It would have been a good continuation. Instead, he just writes off Fenchurch. Nope, that's the last we've seen of her. We're not seeing her again. And I was like, why? You made me love her character like Arthur loves her, and then you just throw her away. And it was so frustrating to me. And it felt like he was not continuing on with the promises of just the immediate last book, which is frustrating enough. When enough time like this passes and you do this to the characters, I'm like, hey, I would have liked to see that book, the story that happened in between her almost. Anyway, then you have Arthur basically gives up on life in this book, and he goes and becomes a sandwich maker on this planet. Then all he does is make sandwiches for the people until he is introduced to another character. And I'm not going to give spoilers on who that character is specifically, but I'll tell you how this character was introduced. This character was introduced through Trillian. She's also known in this book as Trisha. And if Douglas Adams had just made the simple change, and instead of making the character Trillian, had instead chosen to make it Fenchurch, I think it would have been a much better story. But instead, the way the character is introduced is not through Fenchurch, it's introduced through Trisha. And I was so frustrated by that because it felt like it just, again, underkicked or I don't know how to say that. It really hurt the reputation of this book that it didn't make it Fenchurch and instead made it Trisha. So that was so frustrating in itself. I will say, so let me give us some positives, because there are some positives here. The Ford Prefect story in the first half of the book is great. It is hilarious. It is excellently written. It is interesting. His dynamic with the robot that he makes really happy all the time is just hilarious. That was really good. That was about the first half of the book. And then Arthur's story was kind of meandered in the first half of the book. And then about halfway through, they swap, where Ford Prefect's story in the second half of the book was actually pretty boring. And then Arthur Dent's story in the second half of the book was at least interesting because, hey, it added this whole new dynamic and it made him rethink everything. And at the end of the book, in the last chapter, there is an attempt to make a reference to something from the first book. I think it does a horrible job of making that reference. And so at least I'll give him credit. He tried to connect to something, but he didn't actually do it well. And so the book ends, and you feel like, why that's it? That's the ending of your story? That's literally everything? We read 5 books by you. And this is just, I'm going to mostly step away for a second from talking about this specific book and talk about the series as a whole. There were promises made in the first book. What is the meaning of the universe, and why is the answer 42, basically? That implicit promise was made at the beginning of the series. And even though the number 42 shows up in this book, it is not explained what the question was. And also, the problem is that this series was pitched as Earth is no longer, present. So what will Arthur Dent do now that there is no longer Earth, now that he has to go to another planet? And the series never really follows up on that because you spend book 2 going to the restaurant at the end of the universe. Book 3 kind of goes to this alternate planet that's also Earth in the past. Book 4, he goes back to Earth, but it's not Earth when the Vogons destroyed it. And then book 5, he goes away from Earth, but then somehow returns at the end, and it just... The book series as a whole, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy as a whole, does not deliver on promises made. And that's the implicit part of writing a book series. Promises made, promises kept. The idea that you have promises and payoffs, and the payoffs are not worth it as a series. I will still say books 1 and 4 as individual books are incredibly enjoyable. They are very fun and very interesting to read for me. And maybe some other people will feel that the other books are great too for them. But at least if you're writing a book series, you have to make it pay off. And I get that he wanted to do the ridiculous and do the funny. You could still do those and still pay off things for your audience. So I finished this series and I just feel, why did I read the series? I just have this frustrating feel that I was strung along based on these promises and they were not kept. And so I feel cheated. Now, these are really quick reads. Each of these books, I think, I might be wrong, but each of these books I finished like the day that I started reading them because they're each like 200 pages long. So it's not like it's like a Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson that's thousands and thousands of pages per book, or like The Wheel of Time that's a 14 book. It's not like that. But I still feel a little cheated that I was promised a series and I got just a bunch of random books that loosely tie together. So I'm a little frustrated by that. Anyway, going back to the specific book. As I said, it at least gets a positive rating in the sense that it was competently done as its own individual book. But as the final book in a series, it is an entire letdown. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10, noting that that's as an individual, not as the end of the series. As the end of the series, horrible end of the series. I actually want to read the book that the other person wrote just to see if he actually tried to tie everything up or if he just continued to go off in crazy directions. If you've read I think it's Eowyn, I forgot who it is. It's the guy that did the Artemis Fowl series that did it. If you've read that book, the sixth book in the sixth book in the series, or I think they call it the sixth book in the trilogy, let me know. Does he actually pay things off, or is it just continuing the ridiculous storyline stuff? So, anyway, I know I ranted in this, and I don't normally like to rant, but anyway. So that's my review of Mostly Harmless. If you've read the book, let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.